These words are the chilling confession of a man who faced an inexplicable, haunting experience. Today's story delves into the eerie Japanese urban legend known as the Living Doll. This unsettling tale comes from Junji Inagawa, a renowned Japanese actor famous for sharing spine-chilling encounters. While Inagawa insists this story is true, I'll leave it to you to decide what to believe. The events began in 1976. Junji Inagawa had just wrapped up a late-night radio program, exhausted but relieved as he prepared to head home. The night was unusually quiet, a suffocating silence wrapped around the city like a shroud. Inagawa found himself riding in a taxi alongside the show's director, eager to return to the comfort of his home. It was one of those nights when the world outside felt lifeless. The streets were deserted, and a thick fog blanketed everything in sight. The hum of the taxi's engine and the flickering glow of streetlights cutting through the mist were the only signs of life. Both men sat in silence, the fatigue of the night weighing heavily on them. Then it happened. As the taxi sped down an isolated stretch of highway, Inagawa's eyes caught something unusual, a pale figure standing eerily still on the roadside. It was a girl. She stood alone, motionless, and bathed in the taxi's headlights as it approached. Her face, as white as porcelain, seemed to glow unnaturally in the dim light. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, followed the taxi as it passed her. A chill ran down Inagawa's spine. There was no reason for a young girl to be there, especially in such a remote area with no visible houses or towns nearby. He turned to the director, hoping for confirmation of what he had seen, but the man appeared lost in his own thoughts, oblivious to the unsettling sight. Inagawa tried to brush it off. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the fog. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. Little did he know, this brief encounter would mark the beginning of a nightmare. A few weeks later, life had returned to normal, or so it seemed. The memory of the girl lingered in the back of Inagawa's mind, but he tried to move on. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. He received an invitation from Hiro Shimo, a renowned and eccentric puppeteer. Shimo had recently acquired a unique collection of puppets and was eager for Inagawa to direct a play featuring them. Intrigued, Inagawa agreed to visit Shimo's studio to inspect the puppets and discuss the project. When he arrived at the studio, he was struck by its peculiar atmosphere. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, and the dim lighting cast strange, distorted shadows across the walls. The puppets were displayed on shelves and tables, each one crafted with exquisite detail. Among them was one that immediately caught his attention, a doll that sent a wave of unease through him. Its delicate, lifelike features bore an uncanny resemblance to the girl he had seen on the highway. The doll's eyes seemed almost alive, staring back at him with an intensity that made him look away. Its expression was frozen in a faint, eerie smile that felt anything but comforting. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Shimo's voice broke the silence, startling Inagawa. The puppeteer appeared thrilled with the doll, referring to it as his masterpiece. But then Shimo's tone shifted. He admitted that the doll had been troublesome since its creation. Its right arm and leg were twisted and refused to function properly during rehearsals, no matter how much he tried to repair them. Even more disturbing, the doll's creator had vanished shortly after completing it. No one had seen or heard from them since. Despite his growing discomfort, Inagawa agreed to direct the play. It was a prestigious opportunity, and he tried to push aside his unease. But as rehearsals began, strange occurrences cast a dark shadow over the production. The first incident was a fire that broke out at the playwright's home, destroying much of the script. It seemed like an unfortunate accident, But it was only the beginning. During rehearsals, props inexplicably fell over. Entire sets were mysteriously drenched in water overnight, soaking costumes and equipment. Crew members reported hearing faint whispers and footsteps when no one else was around. Tensions grew as more strange incidents unfolded. One crew member claimed they felt a hand brush against their shoulder, only to turn and find no one there. Another described a heavy, suffocating presence in the room, as if they were being watched. Then came the injuries. One by one, performers and staff members began suffering inexplicable accidents, always to their right arms or legs. It was as if the doll's twisted limbs were cursing anyone who came into contact with it. Rumors spread among the crew. Some believed the doll was cursed. Others whispered about the missing creator, speculating that their spirit had somehow become trapped in the doll. Desperate to break the cycle of misfortune, Inagawa sought the help of a local temple. The priest agreed to perform an exorcism, hoping to cleanse the doll of whatever malevolent force was plaguing the production. The exorcism was a tense and somber affair. The priest chanted prayers and performed rituals, and for a moment, it seemed as though the air in the room grew lighter. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the crew dared to hope that the curse had been broken. The play's opening night arrived. Despite everything, the cast and crew managed to pull the production together. The audience filled the theater, and as the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd. The play unfolded without incident at first, but as the final act began, something went terribly wrong. The doll, which had been carefully positioned on stage, suddenly moved. Its twisted right arm jerked upward, its head turning slowly to face the audience. Gasps filled the theater as the doll's lifeless eyes seemed to scan the crowd. Then, in a voice that no one could explain, it spoke. "You shouldn't have brought me here," it said, its tone cold and emotionless. Panic erupted. Some audience members fled the theater, while others sat frozen in their seats, unable to look away. The cast and crew were in shock, unsure whether this was some kind of elaborate prank or something far more sinister. The play was canceled, and the doll was locked away in a storage room. But the strange events didn't stop. In the days that followed, the studio where the doll was kept became a site of unexplained phenomena. Lights flickered, objects moved on their own, and staff members reported hearing faint whispers and laughter. Hiroshima, the puppeteer, became increasingly withdrawn. He refused to speak about the doll, and eventually, he disappeared just like its creator. As for Junji Inagawa, he left the theater world behind and focused on his acting career. But he never forgot the events surrounding the living doll. Years later, he shared his story during an interview, warning others about the dangers of meddling with things they didn't understand. So, what do you think? Was the doll truly cursed? Or was it all a series of coincidences fueled by fear and imagination? Either way, the living doll remains one of Japan's most chilling urban legends, a haunting reminder that some stories are best left untold. But the relief was short-lived. The theater hummed with an uneasy energy as Junji Inagawa took his seat to oversee the live performance. The cast was prepared, the stage set, and the audience, though modest, buzzed with anticipation. Yet, a gnawing dread lingered at the edges of the production, something unshakable and deeply unnerving. As the play unfolded, Inagawa's eyes darted across the stage, monitoring every detail. Then, his heart sank. Something was off. At first, it was a subtle observation, a figure on the stage that seemed out of place. His eyes narrowed as he counted the performers. 5.6.7. There should have been only 6. A cold chill ran down his spine as he realized the extra figure wasn't human. It was the doll. The intricate prop, crafted with unnerving realism, was no longer in its designated place backstage. Instead, it stood on stage, its glassy eyes gleaming under the harsh theater lights. Worse still, it was moving. Its movements were almost imperceptible, like a marionette controlled by invisible strings. The audience murmured, a low hum of confusion spreading through the room. Then chaos erupted. The doll's right hand snapped with a sickening crack, and from the prop coffin on stage, a thick, eerie mist began to pour out. It billowed across the stage, curling around the actors like ghostly tendrils. The temperature in the theater seemed to drop several degrees, and then a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. Kazo-sama, one of the performers, stumbled backward, clutching his head. His wig, for no discernible reason, had burst into flames. Panic swept through the audience as people leaped from their seats, clawing their way toward the exits. In the chaos, the curtains fell, and the show was abruptly canceled. Outside, the crowd gathered in shock. Some muttered about curses, others about hauntings. But one thing was clear: this was no ordinary incident. News of the cursed production spread like wildfire. Reporters from newspapers, radio stations, and TV crews descended upon the theater, eager to uncover the truth behind the bizarre events. They set up cameras, interviewed witnesses, and prowled the dim hallways in search of answers. But the theater wasn't done with its tricks. Cameras malfunctioned inexplicably, their screens flickering with static. Crew members complained of hearing faint whispers in their headphones, though no one else was speaking. Loud, resounding bangs echoed through the empty hallways, making even the most seasoned journalists jump. Doors slammed shut without warning, trapping some inside rooms that were completely empty. The reporters were rattled. Some claimed the doll's curse extended to them, and soon the story was abandoned entirely. No footage, no report. Just silence. Years passed, and the incident at the theater faded into urban legend. But in 1981, Inagawa's connection to the cursed doll came back to haunt him. A popular TV show, Wide Show Plus Alpha, approached him with a request. They wanted to feature the doll in a segment about Japan's most mysterious objects. Initially, Inagawa refused. The memories of that night were too vivid, too horrifying. But the producers persisted, and reluctantly, he agreed. For the show, the production team enlisted the help of a psychic medium to examine the doll. As the cameras rolled, the medium began her reading. What she uncovered was chilling. The doll, she claimed, was a vessel for numerous spirits, women harboring deep grudges. But one spirit's presence was stronger than the others. It was a young girl, her aura radiating rage and sorrow. The medium's voice trembled as she recounted the girl's tragic tale. She was the daughter of a restaurant owner in Akasaka during World War II, the medium explained. When the Pacific War reached its peak, an air raid struck her home. She lost her right hand and leg in the attack and suffered terribly before she died. Her final moments were filled with anger and despair. The doll, she said, had become a focal point for the girl's wrath. Its use in the theater production had enraged her spirit, as if mocking her suffering. Through the medium, the girl's voice emerged, shrill and accusatory. "You can't do that." The medium advised immediate action. "The doll must be placed in a temple," she said. "Only then will the spirits find peace." Transporting the doll proved to be an ordeal. Inagawa and a caretaker, a man named Meo, took on the responsibility. But from the moment they began their journey, strange phenomena plagued them. Time itself seemed to warp. At one point, what felt like minutes turned out to be hours. Both men reported seeing the doll's appearance change during the trip. Its hair, once perfectly styled, grew longer, almost human-like. Its face, once childlike, appeared older, more sinister. By the time they reached the temple, the doll's transformation was undeniable. Its eyes were swollen, almost lifelike, and its expression carried a malevolent intensity that left Inagawa shaken to his core. Even after the doll was placed in the temple, its curse lingered. Hiroshimo, the puppeteer who had worked closely with the doll during the theater production, died in a mysterious house fire. His death sent shockwaves through those who had been involved with the play. Not long after, a young girl visiting the temple claimed to hear the doll speak. According to her, it whispered that it was searching for its mother. Shockingly, the girl's mother turned out to be a seamstress who had designed clothing for the doll decades earlier. The story of the cursed doll began innocently enough, as these tales often do. Junji Inagawa, a seasoned storyteller known for his accounts of the paranormal, had acquired a seemingly ordinary doll during his travels. It was small, with delicate porcelain skin, glossy black hair, and unsettlingly lifelike glass eyes. At first glance, it was a charming relic of Japanese craftsmanship, but as Inagawa would soon discover, there was nothing ordinary about it. The doll came into his possession under unusual circumstances. A friend, eager to rid himself of the artifact, had insisted Inagawa take it. "It doesn't belong in my house," the friend had said, his voice tinged with unease. "You'll understand soon enough." Inagawa, ever the skeptic, had laughed it off. To him, the doll was a harmless trinket, perfect fodder for one of his eerie tales. He brought it home, placing it on a shelf in his study, where it seemed to watch over the room with its glassy gaze. Days turned into weeks, and strange occurrences began to unfold. At first, they were minor, barely noticeable. Books would topple from the shelf without warning. Lights flickered inexplicably. Inagawa chalked it up to faulty wiring and the occasional tremor. But then came the whispers. In the stillness of the night, when the world was asleep, Inagawa would hear faint murmurs. They seemed to emanate from the very walls of his home, growing louder as the hours dragged on. At first, he dismissed them as the creaks and groans of an old house settling. But one night, the whispers became clear. "Inagawa." The voice was soft but unmistakable. It called his name, stretching the syllables like a taunt. Heart-pounding, Inagawa searched every corner of his home, but he was alone, or so it seemed. Suspicion fell on the doll. By now, Inagawa's friend's warnings rang in his ears. He moved the doll to a different room, hoping to quell the disturbances. Yet, no matter where he placed it, the whispers followed. Worse still, the doll seemed to move. It was subtle at first, a shift in its posture, a slight tilt of its head. But one morning, he found it perched on his bedside table, its unblinking eyes fixed on him. That was the final straw. Desperate for answers, Inagawa turned to a local temple known for dealing with supernatural artifacts. The monks agreed to take the doll, promising to perform rituals to cleanse it of any malevolent energy. For a while, peace returned to Inagawa's life. The whispers ceased, and his home felt lighter, as if a dark cloud had lifted. But the reprieve was short-lived. Months after delivering the doll to the temple, Inagawa received troubling news. The monks had lost track of it. Despite their thorough search, the doll was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. The incident was unsettling enough, but the story didn't end there. One day, a young girl visiting the temple claimed she knew what had happened. She told Inagawa that the doll had been shattered during a purification ritual. How she came by this knowledge was a mystery, but her words sent chills down his spine. If the doll was destroyed, why did Inagawa still feel its presence? The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. In the dead of night, he would hear faint tapping on the walls, as if something or someone was trying to get in. Doors creaked open on their own. Shadows flitted across his peripheral vision, vanishing the moment he turned his head. One evening, as he walked through his dimly lit house, he felt a presence behind him, heavy and oppressive. His breath quickened. Slowly, he turned, and there it was. The doll. It stood in the shadows, its glassy eyes locked onto his. Its porcelain skin gleamed in the faint light, and its tiny hand seemed to reach out, almost pleading. Inagawa froze, terror rooting him to the spot. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then, in the blink of an eye, the doll was gone. The experience left Inagawa shaken to his core. He began to question his sanity. Was the doll truly cursed? Or was his mind playing tricks on him? Friends and family noticed the change in him. He became withdrawn, jumpy, always looking over his shoulder, as if expecting the doll to appear at any moment. Despite his attempts to move on, the events continued to haunt him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw its face. Every whisper of the wind, every creak of the floorboards reminded him of its presence. Years have passed since the ordeal, but Inagawa's story remains etched in his memory. Whether the doll was a vessel for some malevolent spirit or simply the product of an overactive imagination, one thing is certain: its presence left an indelible mark. Inagawa's tale has since become an urban legend, whispered among those who dare to explore the unknown. Some dismiss it as fiction, a masterful story crafted by a skilled storyteller. Others believe every word, convinced that the doll was truly cursed. But for Inagawa, the question remains unanswered. Was it all in his mind? Or was the doll a harbinger of something far more sinister? And that's it for today's spine-chilling tale. What do you think? Was this truly Junji Inagawa's experience, or just an elaborate urban legend? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to obliterate that like button, subscribe for more haunting content, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. I've got a vault full of eerie tales waiting to be uncovered, so stay tuned. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, let the darkness take control. Peace out.